Amazing test. Millionaire goes undercover as a pauper, discovering a shocking truth about his son. Jonathan Hayes, a self-made millionaire, reveled in his success. Yet beneath the glistening surface of his life, darkness brewed. While basking in the luxury of his lavish home, he remained blissfully unaware of the emotional chasm separating him from his 17-year-old son, Jake. Weekend after weekend, Jonathan immersed himself in mentoring underprivileged youth, believing he was making a difference. Yet, the irony struck him. In dedicating himself to others, he had neglected the one person who needed him most. He felt an ache in his chest as he recalled Jake's friend group, full of reckless characters offering only hollow validation. Jonathan's heart sank with doubt. Was he losing his son entirely? The fear gripped him, intensifying into a tightness in his throat. Each time Jonathan tried to connect, he faced nothing but apathy and, worse, silence. How had it come to this? Why couldn't Jake see him as more than just the CEO of a booming tech company? Desperation clawed at him, driving him toward an audacious plan. What if he could understand Jake's world? He decided to go undercover as Jimmy, an unassuming mechanic in the local auto repair shop. Trading his tailored suits for grease-stained coveralls felt like an act of rebellion, liberating yet terrifying. Tightening his grip on the steering wheel, he drove to the shop, heart racing with anxiety. He needed to know the grit and perseverance of those who built their lives from the ground up. Behind the counter, he found camaraderie in shared stories and laughter about life's challenges. Yet, even as he served coffee and exchanged jokes, Jonathan couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that this endeavor was merely a distraction from the real issue at home. He inhaled the scent of oil and sweat, wondering if any of it would bring him closer to understanding Jake. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But as the days turned into a blur of grease and small talk, Jonathan overheard two employees whispering about a kid who seemed troubled. His heart went cold at the association. When Jake's name slipped through their lips, he listened, frozen by the revelation that gripped him like a vice. They murmured about Jake's struggles, bouts of depression, unhealthy choices to cope with pressure. Jonathan felt helpless, the walls of his world closing in. This was his son, the boy he loved, and he hadn't seen the signs. The weight of shame threatened to crush him as those sleepless nights replayed in his mind. Jonathan pictured Jake, alone, grappling with anxiety. A sense of urgency surged. Should he return home? Facing the truth would mean confronting the chasm that had grown so vast. His racing thoughts tumbled helplessly. Time was running out, and he felt paralyzed, wrestling to find the right words to heal what had broken between them. Returning home, he hesitated at Jake's closed bedroom door. Holding a pen over paper, he struggled to draft a simple note, his heartbeat quickening with anticipation. But just as hope began to flicker, muffled voices drew his attention. Dread seeped through him, whispering that a new world was unfolding for Jake, a world that might lead them both astray. What choices awaited them on the other side? Jonathan stood before Jake's door, the weight of unspoken words creating a pressure in his chest. Moments of uncertainty drained his courage. Out there, just beyond the threshold, lurked the uncharted territory of vulnerability, a place he had been avoiding for too long. Bracing himself, he pushed the door open, not entirely sure what he would find. The dim light cut through the room, revealing Jake slumped over his desk, illuminated by the faint glow of a computer screen. The chaos of unmade bed and scattered belongings felt hauntingly familiar, a symbol of a boy fighting battles hidden beneath the surface. Jake, he ventured, the name feeling foreign on his tongue, infused with equal parts apprehension and longing. His son looked up, eyes glazed, a mixture of surprise and indifference washing over him. The familiarity of the boy he once knew was eclipsed by the complexity of adolescent challenges, layered with untold stories. "Dad." Jake's voice wavered, revealing a glimpse of the vulnerability Jonathan had feared. It pierced through the silence, drawing Jonathan further into his son's world. He felt like an imposter stepping into a stranger's narrative that he had desperately tried to read through the pages of their fragmented relationship. "I wanted to talk," Jonathan managed, his heart racing. He stepped into Jake's room, navigating through the tangled cords and discarded pizza boxes, feeling the weight of his own neglect press harder against his conscience. "I know things haven't been great between us. Dad, do we really have to?" Jake rolled his eyes, a familiar defensive armor shielding him from his father's earnest intentions. Jonathan recognized this as a cry for connection, masked behind an adolescent facade. He took a deep breath, searching for the right words. Each syllable felt precarious. "I've been thinking about how busy I've been. I thought I was doing something good, but losing touch with you, that was never my intention. I want to understand. I want to be here for you." Jake's expression twisted into confusion. "You don't get it, do you? You're an executive, a millionaire. What do you know about my life?" The accusation pierced Jonathan deeply, but he couldn't argue. All his successes meant little under the intensity of his son's struggles. "I'm trying to change that," Jonathan replied, the vulnerability in his voice surprising him. "That's why I went undercover. I wanted to see what life is like for you, to experience the world you live in." This confession hung between them, a bridge offering fragile hope. Jake's brow furrowed, disbelief tightening his features. "You think playing Jimmy changes anything? You still live in your bubble." But Jonathan sensed something different in Jake's demeanor and opening, even if just slightly ajar. "No, I'm not pretending. I realize I've been absent. Trust me. This experience has opened my eyes." A heavy silence enveloped them, each caught in their own reflections. Jonathan contemplated the walls he had built around himself, the very ones he had erected to shield himself from failure and regret. Was he ready to dismantle them in front of his son? "What happened to you? You used to care," Jake finally asked, his voice vulnerable, shaking with a blend of anger and sadness. With those words, Jonathan was confronted with a choice. Would he continue to hide behind his wealth and title, or would he embrace the rawness of his failures and open himself to the painful truths they shared? He took a step forward, the impulse to lean into his son's hurt igniting a fierce resolve within him. "I want to make it right." "But how?" Jake countered, the skepticism unchanged, yet laced with a hint of yearning. The moment loomed, the air thick with an unspoken challenge. Jonathan realized that the truth they both needed to confront went deeper than surface incidents. It was time for a reckoning. "I need your help," Jonathan whispered, the admission falling weightily into the silence. "Together, let's figure out how to face this." As Jake shifted in his chair, a flicker of contemplation passed over his face. Jonathan's heart raced, sensing the potential for something transformative. But just as Jonathan thought they might bridge their divide, an unexpected message lit up Jake's phone, drawing his attention and casting a shadow over their fragile moment. What awaited them in the notifications would not only test their relationship, but also shape the future they had begun to navigate. Jonathan watched as Jake's eyes flickered to the screen, the momentary connection they had begun to forge teetering on the brink of collapse. The urgency of that notification heralded a potential disruption, one Jonathan desperately hoped to avoid. "What is it?" Jonathan asked, his voice steady yet strained, as though he were trying to maintain balance on a tightrope miles above uncertainty. Jake's fingers hovered over the phone, hesitating between curiosity and reluctance. "Just a group chat," Jake replied dismissively, though his tone lacked conviction. It was evident that whatever message awaited him held more weight than he let on. "We can pause," Jonathan offered, finding it increasingly difficult to ignore the distance that loomed between them, now more pronounced than ever. "No, it's fine." But the dismissal was too quick, too insincere. Jonathan's instincts flared, sensing the need for deeper inquiry. but instinct often collided with hesitation. "Jake," he began, judgment swirling in his mind, weighing whether to proceed. "It doesn't seem fine. Something's bothering you and we need to talk about it. If I'm going to be here for you, then we have to be honest with each other." Jake's expression hardened, the facade of indifference slipping back into place. But Jonathan noticed a flicker vulnerability competing with his son's ingrained defenses. "You don't understand, Dad. You don't live in my world anymore." The thought echoed within Jonathan, seeping into his consciousness like an unexpected draft. He had frozen himself in time, straddling both his corporate successes and the family life that had crumbled like sandcastles with each stock market rise. "Then let me in," he pleaded. "Help me understand what you mean." With a deep breath, Jake's resolve cracked just enough to reveal what lay below the surface, a different sort of plight. "There's this thing at school. People are saying things and—" He broke off, struggling to find words. "People say things all the time. You can't let them dictate your worth," Jonathan encouraged. Was he preaching wisdom or simply tossing away the last thread of connection they shared? "It's not that simple," Jake muttered as he finally looked back at his phone. Jonathan hesitated, contemplating each perceived moment of communication. He imagined peeling away layers to grasp quality moments instead of accumulated noise, firm in a decision that felt almost foreign. "Show me," he said, committing to this raw expedition. Jake let out a breath, heavy with reluctant acceptance, and turned the phone slowly towards his father, revealing a stream of messages aimed at him, a cruel reminder of teenage strife, complete with taunts and disparagement. "They think I'm a loser and you're some hero or something. It's all about popularity, and I'm not part of the club," he explained, the weight of those words making Jonathan's heart clench. The realization struck him like a gust of wind. This wasn't just a struggle for Jake. It was rooted in so much more. Yet Jonathan could clearly see how isolation had clouded his son's vision. Their issues, once contained within familial boundaries, were exposed. Yet Jonathan felt unprepared for the terrain. Staring at the screen, Jonathan recognized a crossroads had arrived. He could champion his son's fears, or condemn him to the shadows of self-doubt, an echo of choices he had made long ago. "What's important, Jake?" he asked, keeping his gaze steady, even as his mind raced for answers. "To fit in, to be accepted," Jake mumbled, retreating into the emotional armor he wore daily. "What if fitting in meant losing yourself?" Jonathan probed, the tension between him and Jake bearing down like a storm cloud. Jake looked lost, flickering between resentment and contemplation. Jonathan felt the swell of hope. Perhaps this was the moment where both of them could step off their pedestals and embrace their real selves. Yet, the question remained. Was he equipped to guide Jake through the thicket of potential pain? The room grew silent, their uncharted terrain now littered with emotional debris that needed careful navigation. As Jake shifted uncomfortably, Jonathan felt a push. This moment could ignite a transformation, but it teetered on the edge of what lay ahead. Would Jake allow himself to be vulnerable under the weight of a father's love? And could Jonathan manage to navigate his own fears, willing to become an ally rather than a distant figure? A sudden buzz erupted in the room, an incoming call on Jake's phone breaking the tension. He glanced at it, hesitating again. What new revelation awaited them in the unexpected? "Who is it?" Jonathan asked, the rhythm of their fragile communication now highlighted by the imminent disruption. Jake hesitated, torn between obligation and the chance of building something they desperately needed. More than just answers existed within this cellular connection. It was the embodiment of choices yet to come. The moment held its breath as they both waited, each knowing that whatever lay ahead might shift everything between them. Jonathan felt the air congeal around them, the electric tether of anticipation bridging the gap between father and son. Jake held his phone closer, the notification glowing ominously. Jonathan's heart raced, the potential for revelation both thrilling and terrifying. "Just answer it," Jonathan said, his voice a quiet command, filled with the kind of hope that birthed uncertainty. Jake glanced at his father, the fight flickering in his eyes before he turned back to the screen. It's them," he sighed. The weight of assumptions hung heavy in his tone, the acknowledgement of a social landscape that had become a battleground. Then let us see what them want, Jonathan urged. The walls of pretense that had defined their relationship previously felt fragile, as if any sudden movement could bring them crashing down. With a deep breath, Jake swiped to answer. "Hey," he said, tentatively, and Jonathan observed how his son's posture shifted subtly, an invisible armor slipping back into place. A voice crackled through, laughter woven into its fabric, and Jonathan strained to catch the words. "Are you there? Come on, loser. We're all going to see the game tonight. You know you want to." The pressure in the air thickened. Jake paled, his expression shifting from concern to simmering resentment. "You guys don't get it," Jake said, his tone chilled. "I can't just show up like nothing happened. Don't be such a baby, man. Just come bring your dad. We can have a real laugh." The insinuation cut deep, like a physical jab, igniting a fresh wave of vulnerability in Jake. He clenched his jaw, the facade of indifference evaporating with each taunt. Jonathan sensed the struggle as Jake processed years of layered hurt. "Just tell them you're busy," Jonathan suggested. His heart raced in sympathy for Jake, while the memory of his own struggles with peer pressure resurfaced from the depths of his mind. Jake snapped his gaze to Jonathan, eyes blazing. "That's easy for you to say. You don't know what it's like to be judged every second of the day." Jonathan exhaled sharply, the sting of Jake's accusation landing squarely on his chest. Yet within that pain ignited a determination. "You're right," he confessed, but I want to understand, and if it means walking through the fire of rejection with you, then I will." Jake hesitated, the phone trembling slightly in his grip. Jonathan could see the battle unfold within his son, a struggle between the desire for acceptance and the haunting isolation he endured. "Seriously?" Jake spoke, incredulous yet tentative. "You'd really come to school with me?" "Why not?" Jonathan declared, unyielding. "You're the most important thing in my life, and if that means standing beside you as a target instead of a shield, then I'll do it." In that moment, a glimmer of connection sparked between them, an untainted space where commitment replaced judgment. Jake was torn, yet something in his eyes softened, a flicker of hope burgeoning amidst the flickers of despair. Jonathan took a step closer, the distance feeling less daunting than before. "But know this, Jake. Popularity doesn't define us. The truth does. And I want you to be happy, even if it means standing out for the right reasons." Jake blinked, the rawness of Jonathan's words unraveling an invisible thread they could pull to draw each other closer. "Okay?" Jake said so softly it was nearly lost. Yet Jonathan felt the weight of their unspoken agreement. Just as the tension began to dissolve, Jake's phone buzzed again, a cascade of new notifications flooding in. The familiar laughter of friends echoed through the receiver, yet it felt shadowed now, distant from the reality they had begun to forge between them. "What if I just ignore them?" Jake asked, apprehension dancing in his gaze, aware that each choice held the potential to shift their newly established connection. "Do what you feel is right, not what they expect of you," Jonathan replied, grounding his voice between encouragement and deep-seated understanding. The world outside remained oblivious, while Jonathan confronted his own vulnerabilities, each shred of confidence he built crumbling at the prospect of standing shoulder to shoulder with his son in a tumultuous sea of adolescent chaos. Would he prove strong enough to support Jake against an environment that demanded conformity? As Jake navigated between his friend's perceptions and the dialogue they had begun, Jonathan wondered if their fragile breakthrough could withstand the next wave of social strife. As they awaited Jake's choice, the room vibrated with the impending storm. Would this moment mark the turning point for their relationship, or would it unravel under societal pressures both could hardly fathom? Jake's fingers hesitated over the screen again, and Jonathan could almost hear the ticking clock of decisions as it pushed them toward an undeniable reckoning. Would he finally step into the light of self-acceptance, or retreat back into the shadows of expectation? The answer lay just beyond the screen, and they both held their breath, preparing to step into uncertainty once again. Jake's thumb hovered over the screen, a tumultuous storm roiling in his mind. This wasn't merely a choice about attending a game. It was a potential pivot point, a way to reclaim a sense of control over his identity. With every cresting wave of panic, Jonathan felt an instinctual urge to step in and shield Jake from what appeared inevitable. But now, he understood that the impulse to protect could also suffocate. "Jake," Jonathan said, breaking through the weight of anticipation. "We can navigate this together. You don't have to decide alone." He was amplifying his resolve with every word, shielding himself from the uncertain future that lay ahead while he tried to project strength for his son. But beneath the surface, Jonathan recognized a parallel echo of his own past: the fear of judgment, the crushing weight of expectation. Taking a visceral step back, Jonathan focused on Jake's trembling fingers. "What do you really want?" This wasn't about the phone call or the laughter behind it. This was about Jake's own authenticity. "I don't know," Jake muttered, frustration etched on his features. He turned the phone in his hands as if it held the answer. "Part of me wants to ignore them, but another part, it's tough, Dad. I just want to fit in, but I hate the way they make me feel." Jonathan nodded slowly, the truth resonating with him. The relentless push and pull of acceptance and individualism had dictated his own youth. It cornered him into a non-existent version of himself just to be liked. He realized they were discovering resilience together, peeling back layers of fear to find the core of who they truly wanted to be. "Fitting in can come at a cost," Jonathan replied softly, crafting his words around a burgeoning understanding. "What if fitting in isn't worth sacrificing who you really are? What better way to show your worth than to stand strong and be yourself?" Jake's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition blossoming behind the angst. Jonathan could sense the gears shifting in his son's mind, weighing the pros and cons of confronting the chaos directly. This was the crux of their bonding moment, the collision of hope and vulnerability. Suddenly, Jake threw his head back, exhaling sharply. "What if they laugh? What if they don't even care that I'm there? What if I make everything worse?" Jonathan winced at the exposed fragility of his son's self-image, echoing a sentiment he had buried long ago. Though fear coiled tightly around Jake's heart, Jonathan tapped into a reservoir of patience derived from experience and conviction. "They might, or they might not. But if you don't give them that power, they can't hurt you quite the same. You'll be choosing your own path, not letting them dictate it for you." Jake's brow furrowed, each thought visibly battling another within him. "It's just hard." "Hard is okay," Jonathan reassured. "You'd be surprised how much strength emerges from embracing the hard stuff. I faced it, and I believe you took the first step towards understanding it now." The space between them felt tangible and charged, pregnant with potential realization. Jake's gaze dropped back to his phone, each notification a whisper of turmoil. It appeared as if he battled ghosts, figures he had given significance to over the years. "Maybe I'll message them," he finally spoke, determination spilling through his tentative voice. "But I want to do it on my terms." "Yes," Jonathan exclaimed, a flood of pride surging through him. "You're taking ownership. That's the essence of standing proud." A minute passed, the silence thick with resolve and vulnerability. Then, without further hesitation, Jake's fingers began to swipe across the screen. Jonathan's heart raced as each movement appeared meticulously calculated, each word curated to affirm his newfound stance. But just as Jake was about to hit send, the sound of a lively social group erupted from the phone, laughter blending into cheers. Each chuckle ignited a flame of doubt in Jake's eyes, one that threatened to unravel the fragile armor he had just begun to piece together. They had become a chorus of expectations, colliding in their assessment of who Jake should be. Jonathan felt the mood shift, and he braced himself. Did Jake truly feel resistant enough to challenge these near echoes of past judgment, or would he buckle under the weight? "Just remember," Jonathan said quietly, "whatever happens next doesn't define you. It's what you choose next that does." Jake took a deep breath, his determination flickering like candlelight. The moment hung delicately, a fragile promise teetering on the brink between acceptance and fear as Jake made eye contact with Jonathan. Words unspoken loomed over them, charged with uncharted possibilities. Would his son press send and claim autonomy? Or would he retreat into the familiar clutches of conformity? Tomorrow loomed on the horizon, a day thick with uncertainty. All they could do was step forward, one way or another, into the unknown, the possibilities stretching wide before them like an unmarked path. Would Jake trust himself enough to navigate it with authenticity, or would the familiar echoes snatch him back into silence? As dawn broke, the golden rays of sunlight flooded Jake's room, illuminating the uncertainties swirling in his mind. He had spent the night tangled in thoughts, reflected in the soft, glowing screen of his phone, where a single message awaited his decisive touch. Today was more than just another day. It was a crucible, a test of his authenticity. Each tick of the clock was an insistent reminder of the time slipping away. Jake rubbed his eyes, recalling his father's words, "It's what you choose next that defines you." With each thought, the question manifested itself, gnawing at his resolve. What if he was not strong enough to step into his own light? Shrouded in layers of doubt, he pulled on a faded sweatshirt, the fabric comforting yet static against the wave of emotion crashing over him. How had it come to this? The gentle nudges of Jonathan, so well-intentioned, felt like epic confrontations in his mind, each urging him to rise above, to embrace visibility rather than hiding behind the walls of anonymity. Taking a deep breath, Jake plopped down at his desk, its surface littered with remnants of unfinished tasks and aspirations. He had to confront the messages, one ominous red notification after another beckoning him to join a world that seemed to promise acceptance at the price of mediating his true self. What if he took a different approach? Pushing against the stale fear curling in his chest, Jake grabbed a pen and began scribbling down what he felt was too chaotic to express through a screen. His words dictated a story he had long avoided. This is who I am, nervous, imperfect, but real. Each stroke grounded him, transforming unrefined thoughts into coherent affirmations. This was about reclaiming ownership not just of his choices, but of who he was and who he aspired to be. As the essay took shape, a surge of adrenaline coursed through him. The raw honesty blessed by introspection carved clarity from confusion. Raising his heart's voice was not merely a defiance against conformity. It was an offering of authenticity. This could be the foundation he needed to rebuild upon. Minutes turned into hours, and Jake found himself fully enveloped in his craftsmanship. The cacophony of his echoing thoughts began to fade. This sense of haven within words led him to a newfound realization: he did not need to fit in. Rather, he could carve out a niche that was distinctly his own. His determination fortified, he stood and looked in the mirror. "You owe it to yourself," he whispered out loud, a mantra breaking free from the chains of self-doubt. "You have the power to make the choice." As the shadows of the past lingered at the edges of his consciousness, Jake felt resolute, teasing courage from the specter of fear. He reclaimed the dynamic momentum throughout the day, and as dinner approached, the delicate dilemma of pressing send on a single message resurfaced, looming like a gnarled oak, solid yet daunting in its permanence. With the setting sun marking the day's end, he was stripped of his distractions. The chaotic laughter outside was now merely an ambient soundtrack to his internal battle. His phone sat like a silent sentinel, threatening to draw him back into the societal current. Tension coursed through his fingers as they hovered over the screen again, adrenaline kicking as the moment of truth inched nearer. Suddenly, as if deities conspired for clarity, Jonathan appeared at the doorway. He waited, sensing the turmoil and hope battling within Jake. "You're ready for this," he affirmed, stepping into the room. Jake swallowed hard, heart pounding under the weight of his unspoken fears. Today was no longer a simple interaction. It was the commencement of a journey in authenticity. The stakes had been raised, and he was now staring at not only what awaited beyond the click, but also at what he was willing to leave behind, layers of pretense, thinly veiling his true self. Yet, the whirlwind of emotion flooded him again, rendering him momentarily speechless. Was he truly prepared to face the potential approval or rejection that awaited him on the other side? Jake took a deep, purposeful breath. "Just remember," Jonathan's voice broke through the silence, "this is about you, not them." In that moment, everything hinged on the choice he would make. With determination surging through him, Jake finally lifted his thumb, poised above the send button, his heart echoing one resounding question. Could he really choose authenticity over acceptance? The answer waited just beyond the digital threshold. With the weight of the world resting on his thumb, Jake's resolve began to quaver as thoughts coursed through him. What lay beyond that fateful click felt like an abyss dark and unfathomable. He could feel the rush of adrenaline, the pulse of urgency thrumming in his veins, but as Jonathan's words lingered in his mind, a flicker of determination ignited inside him. He lowered his phone. For a brief moment, clarity arrived, grounding him. This wasn't merely a message. It was an invitation to step into a new realm of possibility. Yet the fear of loss gripped him fiercely. What if this choice severed the ties he had always relied upon? He could feel anxiety trickling in, weaving itself into the fabric of his thoughts, mixing with the resolve that had guided him for hours. "Look," he said, not quite looking at Jonathan but feeling the steady presence beside him. What if they don't accept me? What if I lose everything?" Jonathan stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You're not just risking everything. You're choosing to seek more authenticity, self-acceptance. You're not alone in this. Remember your words. They are your strength." Jake nodded slowly, absorbing Jonathan's unwavering faith. He felt a surreal connection flourish, illuminating the path he hadn't yet seen. This was not about the approval of others. It was about shedding the masks he had worn for years. Taking a deep breath, he leaned back, letting a hint of a smile break through. He had been so concerned with losing others' acceptance that he had overlooked the cost of what might happen if he continued to live behind a facade. With a determination he hadn't felt in a long time, Jake's thumb returned to the screen. The moment felt monumental, the click resonating with a finality that summoned his entire being to the forefront. He pressed send. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. He sat there, breath caught in his throat, heart hammering. What had he done? Shadows of fear rippled through him, but beneath them, excitement bubbled with uncontainable force. He had executed his choice and now stood naked before himself, free from the restraints that had held him captive. "Now the real journey begins," Jonathan said, folding his arms, a knowing smile creeping across his face. The affirmation felt almost buoyant, lifting Jake just a little higher. Unsure of what lay ahead, Jake couldn't help but feel a rush of possibilities. He was stripped of the burden of pretending to be someone he wasn't. Each new notification seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, signaling life had shifted into a new, unpredictable mode. There was no going back now. As the evening faded into an inky twilight, Jake gazed out of the window, the world teeming with uncertainty, yet brimming with potential. Then came the first response. His heart quickened, reading the words, an acceptance, a nod of understanding. Mix that with other reactions, one laced with negativity, another teetering somewhere in between. Each reply felt like a stone cast into the water, rippling outward into the unknown. He anticipated doubt, queries that he would need to face. Already, he felt the creeping tension of necessity, pressures rising as he would need to confront each interaction head-on. Now recognition dawned. He was embarking on something profound, an uncharted expedition into the boundaries of his own life. The suffocating embrace of uncertainty still held him close, but in that discomfort, growth thrived, a budding resilience taking root in his spirit. Tomorrow, he realized, the settling heaviness of the day beginning to morph into anticipation. Tomorrow will test me in ways I've never imagined. With the thrill of an avalanche gathering speed, Jake turned to Jonathan, ready to share everything he'd begun to unravel. They had traversed this moment together, and now they would face the repercussions side by side. But just then, his phone buzzed again. Another notification, a message from someone unexpected, someone whose judgment could send his fragile hope crashing down. The sender's name sent a jolt through him. Tightening his stomach, Jake locked eyes with Jonathan, reading in his expression an unspoken solidarity, an understanding that he was about to confront yet another layer of himself. The time had come to face, he murmured, trailing off as he braced himself for what lay ahead. The digital threshold promised no easy navigations, and yet he felt something shifting within, an undercurrent of strength surging like a riptide. Could he truly address this new wave without losing himself? Jake could hardly breathe as he stared at the notification. The sender's name felt like a weight on his chest, compelling yet ominous. It was a message from his father, a figure whose expectations had loomed like a shadow over Jake's life. Through every moment of doubt, he had felt the pressure of a legacy he had never truly wanted to uphold. With trembling fingers, he opened the message as the words appeared. They unraveled like a complicated web, both criticizing and questioning his decision to share his true self. "Why would you throw away everything we built? This is a mistake, Jake." The finality in those words hit him like a brick wall. In his father's voice, Jake heard the echoes of a past laden with aspirations that had never felt his own. Anger stirred beneath the surface. What did his father know about the internal battle he faced every day? Each rejection by his own family, every attempt to mold him into a version of success that served only to please them, festered within him. Yet, a part of Jake wished for reconciliation, for understanding that felt just out of reach. In that moment, Jake felt like a ship lost at sea, caught between the waves of expectation and the yearning for authenticity. Looking up from his screen, he realized Jonathan was beside him, an anchor amidst the storm. "What did he say?" Jonathan asked softly, his voice almost a whisper, as if to shield him from additional turbulence. With a deep, deliberative breath, Jake recounted the cruel words, shaking with a blend of hurt and frustration. Each syllable fell heavy in the air between them, but as he spoke, he found that the edges of his anger were smoothing over, perhaps because he was finally sharing the weight he had carried alone for too long. Jonathan listened attentively, absorbing Jake's feelings without interruption, until Jake paused, searching for the right words to convey his tumultuous emotions. "How do I react to this? Am I choosing the right path by putting myself out there?" Doubt lingered like a shadow. Would he spiral back into seeking his father's approval? "You already know the answer," Jonathan said, his certainty cutting through the haze of confusion. "This isn't just about accepting yourself. It's about breaking free from expectations that are not yours to claim." Jake felt a flicker of realization. His journey wasn't solely about confronting others. It was about dismantling the patterns that defined him. Each snide comment from his father had built an invisible wall that he now needed to dismantle piece by piece. It was time to embrace the discomfort and the fear, using them as instruments for growth. He resolved to respond not in anger, but with thoughtfulness. He needed to articulate his perspective not just to his father but to himself. A newfound determination bubbled within him, spurred by awareness of his own strengths. "I'll write back," he decided aloud. "I'm not seeking approval anymore. I want to be clear about what I've discovered about myself." As he composed his response, articulating his feelings with each keystroke, he felt a lightness envelop him. This wasn't just about defense. It was about owning his narrative. He found strength in putting his thoughts into words without apology, determined to be understood on his own terms. As he sent the message, a sense of calm washed over him. The phone, though silent now, felt lighter in his hand. It wasn't the end. He knew the conversation with his father would escalate, but he welcomed it. The tension within him had shifted. He was steeling himself for what lay ahead. Each step would be an exercise in resilience. Then, the next notification buzzed again, a reminder that the world still churned on, waiting for him. This time, however, when Jake glanced at the screen, he felt a spark of curiosity rather than dread. A new message from an old friend, offering Jake a chance to reconnect. Maybe, he thought, it's time for not just one but many brave conversations. The path ahead was still unclear, but Jake could feel the contours of his story unfolding with every choice he made. As he looked at Jonathan, who was silently cheering him on, he felt propelled toward a horizon that had once seemed unreachable. Had he really stepped into uncharted territory? Or was it merely his perception that had transformed? Only time would tell, but there was an undeniable promise that each interaction could lead to deeper self-discovery. And amidst the web of old connections and new possibilities, one question loomed large: what if he were to confront those past choices, not just with his father but with everyone who had played a role in his quest to find himself? The thought rattled him. The next chapter had begun, and he was ready to turn the page. As Jake sat in the quiet of his room, The notification from his old friend lingered in his mind like an unfinished melody. The prospect of reaching out felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Would that conversation, possibly filled with old memories and unspoken truths, help him retrace the steps of who he once was? Or would it beckon forth shadows of expectations that haunted him still? He weighed the options filled with trepidation and curiosity, contemplating the potential unlocking of a door within himself. With resolve, he initiated a message response to his friend, gripping his phone as he expressed a longing to reconnect. The act felt defining, a bridge between his past and the uncertain present moment. With each word, he could feel remnants of old insecurities rise to the surface. Was he still the scared boy seeking approval, or was he becoming someone new? The glow from the screen illuminated the mixture of excitement and dread in his stomach as he reflected on his father's message. Confronting the critical narrative woven by his father had required immense bravery, but perhaps he could extend that courage to others in his life too. He pressed send and leaned back against the cool wall, closing his eyes briefly as he inhaled deeply. Later, he met Jonathan at their favorite cafe, where the atmosphere felt like a welcoming embrace. The warm scent of coffee and pastries filled the air, grounding him momentarily away from his swirling thoughts. Jonathan had become more than a friend. He was now a companion on this uncharted journey, a lighthouse guiding him toward authenticity. "What's next for you?" Jonathan asked, wrapping his hands around his steaming cup, eyes sparkling with encouragement. The question resonated in Jake's mind, as a cacophony of plans and uncertainties played out. He considered his father's expectations, the backlash, and the weight of connection. How did he want to navigate those relationships now? "I think it's time to reach out to everyone who has shaped me. I need to have those conversations, no matter how uncomfortable they might be," he replied, his voice steadying as he vocalized his thoughts. Jonathan nodded, acknowledging the significance of Jake's realization. "Sounds like a powerful way to reclaim your story." "I hope so," Jake said, but a hint of worry flickered through him. What if those conversations exposed more fractures than he anticipated? Suddenly, the cafe's warmth turned stifling, and the reality of what lay ahead pressed in on him. Each potential confrontation carried a risk. What if the weight of those memories sent him spiraling back into self-doubt? To redirect his spiraling thoughts, he focused on his aspirations instead. What about his creative potential? He had always longed to express himself through art, but he had convinced himself that it was a luxury he couldn't afford without his father's approval. "Maybe I could start painting again," he suggested, the words surprising even him. Would revisiting his artistic side be an empowering act of defiance, a way to channel all this turmoil into something beautiful? Jonathan's eyes lit up with inspiration. "That sounds like a meaningful outlet for everything you're feeling." As they continued to talk, Jake felt a shift within him, a growing sense that he was uncovering pieces of himself that had long been buried beneath the weight of expectations. There was a courage in expressing his newfound desires, a realization that embracing his artistic spirit could serve as a fortifying backstop against the winds of judgment that may come from reconnecting with his family. Still, a nagging dread lingered in the corners of his mind. The night would come, and it would bring with it thoughts of his father's expectations and the haunting question: could he truly find acceptance from others if he could not fully embrace himself first? "What if I fail?" he mouthed, almost as a whisper, wrestling with the fear of confronting not just familial relationships but the narrative he habitually constructed around himself. Jonathan leaned forward, his tone serious yet gentle. "You're going to have setbacks, but what matters is what you do after that. This is about carving out space for the real you, regardless of what anyone else thinks." The weight of Jonathan's words settled over Jake like an encouraging aura of truth, igniting that flicker of hope once again. With every conversation beckoning on the horizon, he felt himself inching closer to a breakthrough while tethering to the fact that self-acceptance was a layer cake. All it would take was one brave slice to start anew. As they left the cafe, Jake was met with a flurry of emotions, the pang of potential losses and the exhilaration of newfound freedom. He marveled at how the external world now felt sharp against his inner musings. Every decision, every conversation, every choice to step outside his comfort zone added a precious brushstroke to his evolving canvas of identity. But as he looked up at the vast sky, Feeling both the weight of what lay ahead and the thrill of the journey, Jake's resolve solidified. He would confront those difficult discussions, paint with all his colors, and perhaps, just perhaps, discover yet uncharted dimensions of himself. The road may be rocky, but the art was in the making. And with that thought blooming within him, he couldn't shake the question that lingered in his heart: who would he be when he finally faced the lives intertwined with his own? And what would happen when he dared to paint the truth of his existence in bold strokes? As dawn broke over the horizon, Jake Hayes awoke with a resolute strength coursing through him. The turbulent feelings of the past few weeks had evolved into a clarity he could no longer ignore. He realized that by taking ownership of his narrative, he had begun crafting a life that reflected his true identity, unbound by the expectations of others. After deciding to reach out to his father, Jonathan, Jake felt the familiar grip of anxiety tug at him, but this time it was accompanied by a strong sense of purpose. He would no longer allow fear to dictate his choices. The notion of stepping into authenticity burned brightly within him as he opened his phone and slowly navigated his messages. As he typed a response to Jonathan, he felt his thoughts crystallizing into words that bore his truth. "Dad," he wrote, "I know you have your vision for my life, but I need you to understand that I want to forge my own path. I appreciate everything you've done, but I need to be me, flawed and imperfect." With trembling fingers, he pressed send, the brief burst of anxiety giving way to a profound wave of liberation. It was no longer about seeking approval. It was about establishing boundaries and leaping toward his own dreams. In that moment, the decision solidified that he was not just a reflection of Jonathan's success, but a creator in his own right. Meanwhile, Jonathan was seated at the dining table, his heart thrumming in his chest as he perceived the early morning sunlight hitting the ocean like scattered jewels. It was a reminder of the splendor of life when viewed through a lens of vulnerability. He had taken to heart the lessons learned through his own transformative journey during those undercover days. The weight of his past neglect hung heavy on him, but he understood that growth didn't stem from perfection. It thrived from facing discomfort and choosing connection. As Jonathan's phone buzzed, anticipation coursed through him. He read Jake's message, each word resonating like a harmonious chord, and realized that Jake was ready to claim his own voice. His heart swelled with pride and recognition. This wasn't merely a dialogue about change. It was a manifestation of what both father and son had worked hard to achieve. In that moment, he understood unequivocally that their parallel paths had finally converged. "Jake, I'm proud of you," he typed back. "It takes immense courage to stand up for yourself. I'm here to support you on this journey. Let's navigate this together." As the morning unfolded, the two met for breakfast, the atmosphere charged with budding hope and anticipation. They exchanged soft glances, words flowing easily between them. Each layer of their previously frail relationship transformed into support and mutual respect. "Let us explore those art classes you mentioned," Jonathan suggested, choosing to empower Jake's creative pursuits. "I hear they can bring therapy as much as they enhance skills." The statement felt like a gift. It was a commitment to Jake's aspirations, a bridge of connection spanning the chasm of misunderstanding. With every shared smile over pancakes, they forged a deeper connection. They discussed goals beyond traditional expectations, painting out their visions for a rich life filled with creativity, exploration, and authenticity. Conversations once weighed down by doubt and resentment gave way to laughter, dreams, and plans. The day faded into evening, marked by a newfound lightness that enveloped them. They agreed to approach their old relationships, those with friends and family, with transparency. This pivotal stance invited each relationship to be forged on truth and respect rather than assumption and pressure. The journey ahead would not lack challenges. Still, both Jonathan and Jake emerged from their previous selves, bonded by the understanding that authentic growth could blossom through shared vulnerabilities. As Jake prepared for his first art class, he felt exhilarated yet grounded. He reveled in boundaries renegotiated with his father and the beauty of forging his own identity. "I am here, I am enough," he reminded himself, each stroke of realization beaming brightly like colors on his canvas. And as Jonathan watched his son step into the world with courage, a profound sense of pride swelled within him. He realized that true success was not merely about achievements but about enabling those you love to craft their truths. With their destinies entwined through renewed understanding, Jonathan and Jake had transformed their relationship from one weakened by separation to one strengthened through commitment. Together they ventured forward, each confident in their newfound identities, and ready to conquer the world armed with authenticity. Now they stood at the threshold of their future, filled with limitless possibilities, and a shared direction, true fulfillment blossoming from love and recognition. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and propel these powerful narratives further. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Their journey of overcoming and transformation may depend on it.